Hello, everyone. How we doing tonight? Hopefully all is well. Let me share my screen here, and we have some big news today. Just trying to put it out everywhere, so sorry if you guys are getting spammed by this new indicator launch, but it's been a long time coming. Definitely a very complex tool, so I'm very happy to be bringing it out to you guys, the Rice Statistics people, and also to the community. You guys are going to be able to see it. You guys are going to see it on my charts, on my analysis. So even if you are not a Rice Statistics member, you will be able to see a bunch of showcases of that tool. So very happy about that. Can you guys give me a quick little sound check? Can you guys hear me all right? Hello. Hopefully you all had a great weekend too. Hello. Awesome. All right. And other than this new indicator launch, you will notice that this week we are switching over from September to October. And what does this mean? Well, we have our monthly statistical outlook. It's been going great, to be honest, right? And the month of August is September, usually statistically speaking, right? You guys can see it on my chart right now. They are pretty unclear months, right? There are months that can go one or two ways. They're pretty choppy months. Usually we saw some high resistance, but we managed to get some pretty nice runs. But going into October, especially where we are now, is usually when we start to see some more trending price action as we dive into the last quarter of the year, right? This is where we close it out. This is where we look for our final run high, our final bullish run. This is what I'll be looking for going into the month, right? Seasonality is pretty clear with a very early low formed on NASDAQ. And if we look at ES at the bottom here, this is where we see divergence, right? A beautiful showcase that we should be able to see with our new tool here, our new SMT indicator. But we tend to see divergence with ES forming the low more so towards the second week of October, while NASDAQ is pretty bullish all around and formed the low early on in the first week of October. Statistically speaking, that is definitely what we are going to be looking for, but we can go a little deeper. I always love going into this ranges analysis to get some more insight, right? And I'm always utilizing the furthest possible data that I have access to. I feel like that is definitely the more useful way to go about it. We're going to be looking at the month of October here. So overall, October, pretty average, a little bit of a bigger range, and mostly focusing on the distribution, right? This is why I like using by default, the percentage-based unit, because I can go all the way back to 2005, 2006, and get all of that data to get average movement, right? In the recent years, we've been definitely more bullish, right? Let's say you were to use data from the last 5 years. Well, we'll notice that this range is quite a bit bigger, but it is not in relation to the distribution. So standard across the last 20 years, we tend to see a 4.5 to 5% distribution. This is all movement based. I'll show you guys on the chart. But as we can see from the displayed candle here, we tend to see a much bigger manipulation. So will we see some downwards movement? We also tend to see more bearish months in October, but that is not what I'm personally looking for. Overall, October being very bullish. Now, if we look at when the extreme forms, right, we're looking at the high and low here. Well, we see some pretty drawn out data, but once again, what is the undeniable idea we get from these statistics? Well, we see a trending month, right? Early on in the month and late on in the month is where we see our extreme forms, while the middle of the month is indirectly related to those extremes, which means we don't tend to see it most often. And if we look at the data, 50% chance of the low being formed during the first week, this gives you some very, very good data to go off of to look for a bullish month where the low is formed on the first week. Of course, we're looking at NASDAQ. If we were to switch over to ES, now that data is a little bit more spread out, but still very, very aggressively forming the low early on in the month, where the high is a little more distributed during the month compared to NASDAQ, which has a very high probability of forming at the end, right? We see week 4, week 5. Since now we are starting the month on a half week, right? This is important to point out, right? I think Wednesday is the first. Let me just confirm with the announcement we made earlier today. Yes, Wednesday is October 4th. 1st, sorry. What does this mean? Well, week 1 is just a half week, right? This is how it works. So this year actually, we'll be seeing a week 5, so a very high probability of forming the high later on. And as per the rates, right, what do you expect with a classic trending bullish month? Well, low probabilities of rating the rate, but if we are to rate it, it should be during week 1 with an overwhelming statistical probability of 80%, right? 80%, of course, is not the probability of reaching the low. We have a 50% probability of reaching the low of the previous month. And with that 50% probability, we see 80% chance of it being during week 1, right? It's important to make the difference between these values. As per the high, we see 70% with week 1 and week 2 being overwhelming probability as well, cumulative probability of 71%. So definitely some very nice probabilities for previous month high, previous month low. But if we were to look specifically as if we were to have a bullish month of October, well, of course, the monthly high rate is very high probability, still a high probability of the monthly low rate. So, of course, going on our charts, it's going to be very interesting to see where these levels are with those probabilities. If we are to have a bearish month, we still see a very high probability early on in the month to reach the monthly high. And still, even with just a slightly better low rate probability, it is still overwhelmingly during week 1. So a lot of different information there. Definitely going to be very nice to clear up once we go to our chart, which is what we are going to be doing right now. Let me just filter through my stuff and change the stream. This is why I need, for the people in Discord, right? This is why I need to have just like a quick switch button. Maybe a stream deck or something could be useful, so that I could change my stream right away so you guys don't have to wait it out. I will also take this opportunity to bring in our new indicator. Why not, right? We are on our chart. We are looking at the daily. It is very nice to have that here. You guys will notice a bunch of different settings, bunch of different things. Today will not be the day where I go over these settings. They're all outlined in the indicator's description. But tomorrow, which will be our first price action review of the week, I will be going into all of these settings in great detail. So if that is something that interests you, then definitely be on the lookout for this. But default settings are what I'm interested in. I want to see recent SMT. And here, of course, let's bring in NASDAQ so we can see the SMT in relation. Well, actually, we don't need that because we see on one asset. Of course, our divergence at the low still holding. And if we bring our candle ranges here, and we showcase previous month's high and low, we'll notice some very nice things here with September breaking through previous month's high. But once we open for October, right, which is what we don't see at the moment, we'll notice that the low of the month, right, let's just mark it out as sell side for now, but previous month's low will become here and previous month's high will become here. Of course, we have Monday and Tuesday, which for an FP week, even though it is technically the end of September, tend to be very volatile days. So we could form a new high before going into October, but we definitely won't, well, I don't want to say definitely won't, but there is an overwhelming chance that we do not reach previous month's low before then. So in that regard, what am I going to be looking for? Well, of course, a potential retracement, right? As we saw, there is an extremely high probability that we form the low of the month during the first week. So even if we see bearish movement early on in the week, I'm going to be expecting NFP to fully reverse this move and continue on this bullish trend that we've been establishing this month of September after some very aggressive August consolidation. Overall, am I going to be looking for any specific level to be met on a retracement lower? No, but I am going to be looking for divergence to form at these bearish liquidity points, right? Daily swing points are important for me. They showcase levels of potential reversal. So of course, I'll be using the indicator to look for potential divergence at these levels, right? Overwhelmingly simple in that sense. But as we can see, ES has shown a little more need to go lower, if I can say it like that. So having Monday and Tuesday actually trade lower would be the best bet. See some form of divergence form at these levels with ES trading all the way down to here. and we can see a very easy, very nice reversal going to previous month's high, whether this week or early on in the next week. That's the plan going into October for this week and the following weeks. Of course, since I don't have a clear bullish level after this point, you guys know how I interact with it, always using specific candles, right? Previous day high, previous day low, pretty straightforward stuff in that regard. But statistically speaking, I will be using my little distribution and total range levels. What does that mean? Well, of course, we haven't opened October yet, but let's just imagine October opens here. Well, I know I have a 4.5% average range, of course, with no precision in this sense, but we'll go back to Rice Statistics and look at it. So if I see that coming up on week 4, we have reached this level, then I know that I can frame some retracements going into the end of the month. Once again, if we go back to Rice Statistics here in a second, going back over those extreme probabilities, right? We know it is a high probability of trending until the end of the month, but we could see a week 4 high form with a cumulative probability of 60%, right? Which means majority of the time we'll see the high formed before week 4, but then that 40% will give us week 5. So we could still see an end of the month retracement, but I will be basing it off average range levels, which in this case, actually, I think I was looking at September early on, but 6.6% total range and 4.6% distribution. And also filter using the previous entry, previous month being bullish, right? And previous rate status, which had a high rate. You know, we can go into more detail and actually profile the high week and the low week, but I don't like doing that on monthly ranges. I like doing that when I'm looking at, hey, this week, for example, is the 4th week of September, and there was a high, the previous week formed the high this day and that day. Or let's say I'm looking at even further at days, right? The previous day formed the high between that time and that time. What does that tell me about this upcoming Wednesday, for example? This is why I like to use a specific extremes filtering for the previous entry. But in this case, we tend to see after a bullish September, right? We tend to see October have quite a smaller range, actually pretty distributed in terms of direction. For extremes, pretty straightforward. After a bullish September, we have an overwhelming chance of seeing a classic buy month, right? Low formed during week 1, high formed during week 5. And as per raids, to be expected, we see a higher probability of reaching the monthly high. And actually, this is a very useful data point, which just confirms further our idea that we should not be revisiting previous month's low, even if we are to see a bearish month of October, right? Even if it's going to be a bearish month, and let's actually look at the data instead of just talking about it, we have a very low probability of going all the way back down to previous month's low, even if the previous month has, well, mainly because the previous month was bullish. So overall, some very clear data. It's nice to finally get back to a point where we can see some quality data points, right? Because for the last 2 months, it's been a little bit 50-50, so to say, right? We had a lot of divergent factors, but overall, just to go back over the months of September, we had a very clean classic buy month, right? We opened right here, formed a low, of course, confirmed with SMT. Once again, love the new indicator. You guys would definitely see me using it. I've been using it in the behind the scenes, and I can finally bring it up to the public. So definitely very happy with that point. But we had a classic buy month. Now, this is what I want to see with the following month. And of course, we'll be looking at that starting on Wednesday, which will open our month. But I did want to showcase this. You know, we were looking at 4.64%. So no precision in this sense, but I will be bringing precision once we see the opening price of the month. Of course, draw these levels for myself and understand, you know, we were looking at like, we had the potential for up to a 2%. I think it was 2.4%. Once again, once we open, I will bring these levels with more precision. I'd be happy to do so actually during a price action review. So if you guys are interested in seeing how I use the average range levels specifically on Rice Statistics in my trading, I'd be more than happy to showcase that. So if you guys want to see that, definitely let me know. during this week's price action reviews. But overall, what do we see? Well, these two levels are going to be main points of interest. Of course, if we open all the way down here, I might be looking for a little bigger of a retracement going into this large range for our first discount in efficiency, or perhaps even a little bit further going to the second one right here without, of course, closing past the midpoint of this bar. That could be a very nice framework to trade. We have any questions? I know these outlooks can be quite heavy. I try to stick to very simple data points, but it's important for me to highlight every single aspect that I look at, because that is what goes on in my long-term profiling, right? When I started these monthly outlooks, I didn't know if statistical data could be used to analyze and profile months to that extent. So we tested it, and turns out it works really fucking great. Right? So now when I'm doing these, I like to showcase every potential aspect. And as a conclusion to all this data we saw, what does it tell us? Well, it tells us we expect a classic buy month, which means we formed the low early and we formed the high late. And we also have specific levels to look at, confirmations of when to look for previous month high, previous month low. This all brings in the same idea of we basically want a repeat of September. Want to see an early low formed right up and expand aggressively right up until the end. And thanks for the outlook. My pleasure. I do have some times for any questions, right? Whether it's in relation to the outlook or the new tool being released, I am happy to answer anything. But as you guys may know, I did just post on Twitter. So if you're curious about the new tool, you can definitely go look out there. I do appreciate any support that is shown on that end, right? Leave a like, leave a comment. I would definitely appreciate it. Type, I'm guessing it was all cool. Thank you, appreciate that. You will fucking love it, Tricks. I'm telling you. Best $50 ever spent, let me tell you that. See you typing, AZ. I'm going to give you a second. Oh, never mind. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to call it a night here, guys. As I said, for the PA reviews, we are going to have price action review every single day except for Thursday. So definitely going to be a busy week within the Rise Trading Discord. So hopefully I will see you guys in numbers there. You guys have a great rest of your night. Good luck trading tomorrow. And once again, we will see each other tomorrow night for first price action review of the week. Bye, guys. Have a great night. Yes, sir, AZ. Well said. Let's crush it this week. Bye, guys.